Hello, one and all. This is Incarnate. This man, it's a week later, and I'm still shocked. I'm still in disbelief over all of this. But I absolutely wanted to make this tribute to one Bray Wyatt. Otherwise, his real name was Windham Rotunda. Man, I guess best place to start is where to begin. This is going to be a tough one. So last Thursday, right? I am just scrolling through my Instagram. Normal night as always. Nothing special about it. And I happened to notice that my cousin had posted on his Instagram that Bray Wyatt had passed away. I was stunned. I absolutely could not believe it. And he's not the type to joke about something like that. So I immediately had to take to Google to confirm what it is that I had read. So it turns out that Bray Wyatt had been away from the ring since March. The reason why was undisclosed. I didn't know if it was mental health or if it was his physical well-being. So man, I unfortunately when I Googled the news, it was confirmed, and I noticed that what you're seeing now is what I read. I noticed that he was 36 years old, and I had never looked up what his age was, but I was just shocked that he was so young and he passed away. The reason why at the time was undisclosed. And one thing that I wanted to mention at the top of the stream, that I mentioned this not to sully the point of this video or the memory of Wyatt, but I remember posting the news on my different social media profiles. And I try not to give any oxygen to haters or detractors or what have you. But I did notice that a couple people on Reddit were asking, "Oh, what does this have to do with movies, man?" Because I'm typically, whenever I do any kind of content, it revolves horror movies or TV or video games within that genre. But what does this have to do with horror? It's like, well, geniuses. Bray Wyatt was someone that I considered to be a nightmare character. And not for nothing, but every incarnation that he's ever had has been horror related in some way. Most notably is the Fiend character, which, if you look at him, hey, shocker, appears as a horror movie monster. Not only that, but the mask itself was designed by Tom Savini. Does that name sound familiar? That is a horror movie effects wizard. So, anyway. And it's like another point of contention that I had is, hey, when The Undertaker retired, and not only were horror websites covering the recent passing, but when The Undertaker retired, plenty of news websites and horror media were covering that. And the day that The Undertaker leaves this mortal coil, please believe that there will be plenty of horror media covering that. In fact, why aren't more horror fans talking about this? You've had, on 3 separate occasions, the horror character that was Bray Wyatt was the world heavyweight champion of a major entertainment empire. I don't know, pay the man some respect and acknowledge what it is that it represents, that horror was able to transcend into other forms of media. All that aside, I just had to get that out just because it bugged me. So I wanted to do this video. I was finally ready to do this a week later. And a week later, it's just very... You struggle to find the words, you know what I mean? And again, it's never easy dealing with loss, but going about speaking about it and describing it. But if you'll indulge me, I would very much like to dedicate this video not just to the life and legacy of Bray Wyatt, but also his career. So if you'll indulge me, I'd very much like to do a recap of his tenure in the spotlight and limelight. So, I remember what started for him as far as, within the public eye of WWE. He was a member of Nexus as Husky Harris. So, the event was Hell in a Cell 2010. Oh yes, we're taking it way back. The match was John Cena versus Wade Barrett. Remember him? The stipulation was that if Cena loses, he joins the Nexus. So at the event, you have this chubby lineman-looking dude waddling in to the match, interfering on behalf of Wade Barrett and costing John Cena the match. So yes, once again, he was introduced as Husky Harris. Despite his inclusion in a high-profile match, his remaining tenure, much like the borrowed time that the Nexus faction itself was living on, was short-term and quickly fleeting. Husky Harris went on to have matches here and there as part of the stable. Honestly, matches of non-repute. And to be honest, so aimless was his career trajectory that by the end of the first month of the next year, Randy Orton would punt kick him right back to NXT. Based on what it is that you're seeing in front of you and his presentation, there wasn't anything outstanding about him. There wasn't... I don't even think he got time on the mic. He was just there, and to be honest, when the Nexus was a prominent stable, it pretty much lived and died by Wade Barrett. There wasn't anything, how can I put it? There wasn't anyone that really stood out, not that I can remember, and if they did stand out, it would be after the Nexus, imploded, so to speak. So... if time heals all wounds and good things come to those that wait, or Wyatt, then what does time do with hurt? What malice awaits those who can't wait? It would take the winds of change and much reflection, but 2.5 years later, we'd get our answer. For now, we look upon a glass darkly. After many vignettes leading up to his what would be a memorable debut, 4 days after the 4th of July on 2013, appeared what was against a fellow monster, Kane, came in the form of Bray Wyatt. This was just the start of things to come, for a gimmick, for character arc, and rivalry alike. So, after he would appear, Bray Wyatt would make his debut on the scene in WWE. He would go on something of a 1.5 month long feud with Kane. This allowed him to, offer his presentation to the fan base, and people took to him instantly. At first, there's that, quizzical response to a Bray Wyatt. We had not seen anything particularly like that So to see this cult leader was something that we didn't realize that we wanted so badly. What would have seemed like incoherent speech that was kind of aimless instead was just monologues that were so engrossing that captivated the audience. It truly was something that we hadn't seen before, and truly something special. You know what I mean? And I'll get to just why that was something so gripping, and it took the WWE fan base by storm. I'll be getting to that shortly. However, first, Kane would have his comeuppance, what he assumed would be vengeance for the attacks of the Wyatt family. It was SummerSlam 2013 in a Ring of Fire match. And the match wasn't much to write home about, but it was a very good start, I can say, to a very memorable character. How can I put it? Seemingly, the unthinkable had happened. A star was born. From the embers of obscurity, from the ashes of the PG era, a phoenix had arisen. A firefly had been reborn. The stage was set. It wasn't just a star on the rise, but a man with a plan, a shepherd and his flock, a pastor with those to preach to, a father and his family. From here on out, every Monday night, we were serenaded to madcap sermons that captivated audiences, to a psychosis turned siren song. A sinner with his symposium, a pastor with his pulpit. The evangel of evil. It really was incredible, almost mesmerizing, listening to him, watching this man operate, seeing what he was able to do, because for so long, so very many people would simply just wrestle. They would have their storylines in and out, gone, there and gone. But it was with just such extreme rarity that you would see someone absolutely take command of the mic and the audience as well. It had become something that people had seemingly forgotten what to do in the backstage, in the ring, in the squared circle. It was like, how did we go from so very many characters that were so very captivating, from not even all the way back to the Attitude Era, but admittedly in the Ruthless Aggression. And yet we had just meandered for year upon year, demanding change, getting nothing in return. If we got someone new, they were short-lived, or they couldn't cut the mustard, quite frankly. And here comes Bray Wyatt. And again, you have to understand how easily people bought into his charm, because at first the reaction was always the same. Like, what? Who is this guy? What the hell is he talking about? But the more you listened, the more you wanted to listen, the more you wanted to see more of him. So that brings us nicely along to what came next. How appropriate that Bray Wyatt had deemed himself the Eater of Worlds, considering he took an entire universe by storm. With his natural charisma and skill on the mic, he had managed to spin straw into gold, weave what would have been otherwise conceived of as gibberish into prophecy. I distinctly remember a coworker asked me, "What even is this guy?" But she didn't ask in a mocking tone. It was more genuine curiosity. And obviously, this guy had stood head and shoulders above everybody else in the locker room. In response, I simply retorted, "Duck Dynasty Doomsday Prophet." This seemed like the angle that Rob Zombie was going for with his Devil's Rejects, except not a cliched band of rednecks bred from the mind of, you know, a redneck. And, oh, by the way, what Bray Wyatt was attempting was actually good and didn't suck. So, his July debut certainly made an entrance and an impact. The SummerSlam match was a strong start. And you know when I knew that we had something special? When it was that it finally, it began to click. And when it was that the Wyatt family had made a statement. Let's turn the clock back to Survivor Series 2012. The match was the WWE title with CM Punk versus John Cena versus Ryback. Interestingly enough, that this three-way match would be interrupted by yet another triple threat. A faction that crashed the party of the main event. This three-headed attack dog was none other than the Shield. Not just enforcers in big boss man gear doling out their personal brand of justice, but they were actually protected by the Office. Like I said, there had been flashes of brilliance before in WWE. However, those were always short-lived. And you would have it where the Office, namely Vince McMahon, would seemingly just get tired of whatever pet project that he had taken on. So, just so happens that for me, it felt that they finally got right what they got wrong with the Nexus. If they debuted in November of 2012, then, for 1 year's time, many would stand up, all would fall. You have to understand that this was something that not only the Office was behind, not only were these guys driven and hungry and confident, but it's something that the fans themselves gravitated towards. Now, you could say the reason is because of the fanfare around Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins because of their time on the Indies. But no, fans, it's easy to forget that fans gravitated towards Roman Reigns at the onset. It was when they tried to it was a very botched attempt to get him over, and honestly get him over as a face without a faction. And also just the fans, it was a lot of drama with their preference of Daniel Bryan. Anyway, these guys, I mean, it was such a breath of fresh air. It wasn't that they were going to have a hot streak going and then kick to the curb a month later, or they were going to be, de-emphasized. No, man, they were, for a year strong, they were protected. They were treated as a big deal, and they weren't shoved down your throats. It was never, for me, any type of excess with them, because that's another thing that can kill a rising star. Just seeing way too much of them. They're just in your face way too much. Familiarity breeds contempt, and it was astonishing. And I remember myself firmly behind this faction, and I never got bored of them. It never felt like too much. It never felt like overindulgence, and the fact that it was, they had not. I remember CM Punk mentioning that these were the three most protected guys since Bobby Lashley, which is true, but let's not forget about the Cena monster. So, it seemingly, after them taking down three-man opposition, after every challenger that stepped up to them, after tag matches, it genuinely seemed like no force could oppose them. So, I ask again, when did I know that the Wyatts had truly arrived? When they crossed swords with the Shield. What started as a mix-up between the trios exploded into an all-out brawl. I'm getting goosebumps just remembering that. I mean, the crowd reaction was off the chain. You could, like, it's one thing when they try to force feed you a storyline or characters or a match, and you just don't care and nothing is hitting. But there was a genuine buzz in the air that you could feel. And that is something that, I don't want to get too off course here, but that is something that WWE just doesn't provide you anymore. You're told to like something. You're told that this is a moment. You're told that such and such is special. But it just isn't, because that's not something that you should be convinced into understanding. It should be something that you feel. And that's been that at the best times that pro wrestling has ever been on top. That's how it is that they're able to get their message across, when it's something that you feel, when it's natural. Yes, there needs to be build, and yes, they need to convince people to invest in it by giving us a reason to do so. Not just them force feeding, their flavor of the month just because they like whoever it is that they think can carry the ball. No. And this proved that, man. I mean, the fans in attendance, this was something that was deep seated within them. That's what makes for a pop, and that's what the fans wanted. And I'm not just talking about the Fireflies. I distinctly remember Bray Wyatt, of all people, was the one attempting to mend fences, or at least have a ceasefire. I remember him yelling, "We are the same." How true those words would prove, but we'll get to that later. November 13th, 2013. Bookmark that face-off and pay close attention to the crowd reaction, because for now, what I'll explain is context. So, what I've been mentioning all along is the dearth of talent, or at least exploitation of said talent in the right ways by WWE ever since the days of WCW, ECW, competition, the Monday Night Wars, and the Attitude Era. There was just such a flippant non-investment by a company that wanted us to very much invest in their product, in their programming, in their pay-per-views, in their characters. Like after 2001, it was very rare that we got, superstars, let alone actual stars. We were just being told what it is to like, and there wasn't, with the exception of John Cena and very few others who were full-time athletes there. I mean, they didn't get behind anybody. For years, for decades, for generations, for eras, WWE just couldn't make stars. It was not like a lot of people spoke about how it is that seemingly they had forgotten, but it's like, dude, you are pushing the Attitude Era on us. You have your how can I put it? You have your app. You have all of the footage. You have what it is to serve as your template, your blueprint. You have all of this footage. Or you have people who were still, who started out in the Attitude Era, still with the company, and yet nothing. Like you act as though you don't have any lessons to glean from any of this. It was maddening for fans. It was year after year, mania after mania. It's just same old faces. It was genuinely disheartening. And man, when the Shield debuted, I mean, look, we had seen stars, allegedly, like Ryback, who admittedly was mishandled, but that just serves as an example of people who came around, flavor of the month, here today, gone tomorrow, people who the company wanted to push, or people who the fans themselves wanted to push, like Dolph Ziggler, who didn't amount to much. And yes, the company was to blame for mishandling of talent, for bland storytelling, but truth be told, there were plenty of people who frankly weren't that good, or they were overrated, whether by the company or the fan base. And look, what I'm not talking about is cheap pops. A theme song or a catchphrase becomes more over than the wrestler, or the obligatory applause whenever a wrestler's music hits. No, I'm talking about groundswell support. That fever pitch that, again, the fans just feel it. They wait in anticipation. This is something that gets people talking. For so long, we had been deprived of that. I mentioned at the top of the stream that my forte is horror within movies, within film, within video games. Movie magic is completely lost in cinemas. They think nowadays that, and don't take my word for it, look at how the summer blockbuster spewed out one dud after another. But just to give you an example, Hollywood thinks that hey, more special effects and big bloated budgets. You thought I was going to say something else. Big inflated price tags for these films. Hey, that's movie magic. No, man. And that's the best equivalent that I can give to what was missing in the squared circle. The forgotten art of wrestling. The squared circle had squandered opportunities in the past. Now, it's hard enough to make a star. They had a faction. WWE had a faction that was massively over with the crowd. And now, they had two of them. But their time will come. Take stock what stables looked like before the Shield. I mentioned a couple of different names of what stars that didn't quite land or really take off, to be honest. But Jesus, look at what stables looked like before the Shield and the Wyatts, such as the Spirit Squad. Oof. Hell, look at what stables looked like after these teams. You had the New Day or the OC, the League of Nations. Oh, God, League of Nations. Okay, so these ships crossing in the night were brought together because of feuds with CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, respectively, and split from each other in order to divide and conquer. The Shield targeting Punk, Wyatt's against Bryan, until they weren't. So, in a elaborate ruse, Daniel Bryan had actually decided that if you can't beat him, join him, and became a member of the Wyatt family. This went on for a week or two, and this was before a double cross. Treachery led to Bray versus Bryan at Royal Rumble 2014. Now, much respect to Daniel Bryan, that he made Bray look great. This match stole the show, especially considering the ending, booties to anybody, of the Royal Rumble. But this was something, admittedly, at some point, a star, a wrestler, needs to be able to show some measure of ability in the ring. And the match with Kane, decent enough start, but this was where Daniel Bryan was able to shine in order to make and help Bray Wyatt just really deliver on a good match to make him look strong. It's one thing to for him, Bray Wyatt meaning, to be the cult leader of his faction, but he really needed a strong win here, and that's what Daniel Bryan delivered. And hey, shout out to him, because this was absolutely something that Bray needed. It was very critical to his character. And keep in mind, Daniel Bryan had just, embarrassed him. And not just embarrassed him with a loss, because Bray Wyatt was undefeated at this point, but embarrassed him by entering that which he held so sacredly, which was his Wyatt family. Again, this was the match that stole the show for Royal Rumble. Now, the Wyatts interfere in a thoroughly lackluster main event of Cena versus Orton for the umpteenth time. The only thing worse than the match was the match that this set up for Bray, but more on that in a second. This, however, was just the beginning of 2014. Now, it would turn about that interference against Cena once again would actually work in Cena's favor. The match this time around was to qualify for the next pay-per-view main event that came at the expense of Bray's old friends, The Shield. So the Wyatts inadvertently secured 2 matches for the Elimination Chamber. Cena would now enter in the cage for the title, and the Hounds of Justice would at long last cry havoc against the Agents of Chaos. I previously mentioned WWE's star power problem. Now I'd like to talk about match heat. The chemistry, the excitement, where the chemistry and excitement between these two teams was main event levels of anticipation. The world title couldn't generate this much buzz because of who was feuding in it and who was holding it. Wrestlers today wish that they could have this kind of rivalry. I've said for the longest time, it should not be just about this match here and that match here and this title. No. To me, what I think builds legacies and builds memorable title reigns are those rivalries. In this feud, you had the 2 hottest acts going and were now trained on each other. Order versus Anarchy. Guys, this is Wrestling 101. This was a hot angle. I mean, while Cena was utterly boring audiences with his stranglehold on the main event scene, and Randy Orton couldn't get over no matter how many titles they strapped over his shoulders, I mean, this right here, what you're looking at, this is where it was at. Guys, Elimination Chamber 2014. Watch this match. It was just absolute. It was everything that wrestling should be, once was, and that seemingly had forgotten by this point. And by the way, it wasn't just watch this clash. It ain't a match. It's a war. The storytelling, the character development, the crowd investment. Why had it taken so long for WWE to provide us this? Because the Shield and the Wyatt family delivered. There are only 2 critiques that I have against this. One is that this match should have happened at Mania, especially considering what it was that we ended up getting. And if anything, this was the match that should have been in the Elimination Chamber, even if, admittedly, they didn't need it. They didn't need the cage. But again, what it with so many different elements in this match, different styles with each individual wrestler, with different characters, with so many bodies too. Concern yourself with getting enough time, getting enough highlight moments. It, to me, is incredible just how well this played off. It was absolutely amazing to watch this because it had so many different elements going on, and I'm telling you that it fired on all cylinders. Not only would these teams go on to feud in 2 other matches, once before Mania, and for the 3rd match, while the Shield was also feuding with a recently reorganized Evolution, all of the matches between them were bangers, and I don't use that word often, and all were won by the Wyatts. Folks, understand something. This is the closest the company ever came to matching the 6-man magic that came out of the founding teams of the TLC. Let that sink in. The Shield, the Wyatts, ignited the crowd in ways not seen since the days of the Hardys and the Dudleys and Edge and Christian. Give me one quick moment. It is very unfortunate that after this, it was downhill. But I suppose you can only skyrocket for oh so long. So, Bray Wyatt had come off of dual impressive wins at the opening pay-per-views of 2014. He had a strong win in singles competition against Daniel Bryan at the Rumble, and at the following pay-per-view Elimination Chamber, his faction had defeated their greatest rivals in the Shield. Not only that, Bray was undefeated. A match with the top guy in the company should have meant more. However, Cena did business the way he always has. The story was that of a maniacal force turning a hero to the dark side. The reason that this Dark Knight Joker dynamic failed is that John Cena can never be Batman. Take a look at the sign there. If Cena wins, we Wyatt. That's a hell of a statement for the good guy. The loss at the grandest stage stunted Bray's momentum. Oh god, and the rematch at the next event didn't help. A child doing sing-along distracted John Cena, so Bray Wyatt gets a tainted victory over Cena. Just for Cena to break the tie and bury another star on the rise at their third pay-per-view encounter. Another one bites the dust. I mean, this was such an infuriating match for no other reason that Cena didn't need this win. Like, there was no reason for him to beat him. And by this point, this was WrestleMania 30. So, it had been nearly a decade that this guy had been in the main event scene. Like, so many people after Brock Lesnar defeated The Undertaker at this very pay-per-view were speaking about how Brock Lesnar needed to build up other stars and let them beat him. It's like, really? This was WrestleMania 2014. Brock Lesnar came back after WrestleMania 28 in 2012. When did John Cena have any burden to put people over? Because I would have to look at the entire record of WrestleMania matches that John Cena's had, but this was unquestionably one of, if not the most egregious match where it was so obvious that it was obvious who should have won. Bray needed this victory, Cena didn't. If the Mania match didn't stagger his stock, the dual Cena matches did him no favors. Sadly, from here, what befell Bray was what so many others that I had mentioned before fell prey to. He began to meander for the remainder of 2014, seemingly directionless. The Shield had broken up. Bray went on to have a feud with Dean Ambrose, which it felt like such a time killer and a time waster. People were trying to, especially the announcers, were trying to drum up some kind of excitement. Who's gonna out crazy the other? Remember that? And it wasn't the same because Bray wasn't the same after his Mania loss. So much momentum just utterly squandered, and sadly, that was par for the course when it came to John Cena. Honestly, Bray wouldn't have anything meaningful going on until a return to the scene of the crime. Seemingly, what was considered a dream match was set up between Wyatt and Undertaker. This was the dream match that fans wanted, but Sting at Mania would have been preferred. There were a lot of elements that, to me, didn't work about this. Now, again, this absolutely would... Bray Wyatt versus The Undertaker. The Eater of Worlds versus The Phenom. Dude, that's a main event. That's a main event caliber. That's a main event quality. Here's the thing. And you have to remember the timing. First off, this was the first Mania since the streak had been broken. You're not going to pin Undertaker a second time at an event that he owned for 21 matches previous. This should not have happened at Mania for obvious reasons, because if you're going to go against Undertaker, guys, let's be honest, that's Undertaker's pay-per-view. That's Undertaker's event. This should have happened at SummerSlam because that would have guaranteed a Wyatt win. He would have now held victories over both Brothers of Destruction. And considering that SummerSlam was the pay-per-view that he had his inaugural match in, or pay-per-view match, it just would have come full circle. The build wasn't anything special. I'm sorry to say, the mind games just play better when both opponents are present. And I'm sorry to say that from what I remember, it was just kind of business as usual. Lightning strikes, Bray laughing maniacally. It's like these two needed to test one another. In order to properly build this up, you had to have each of them screwing with one another, really getting under one another's skin. I distinctly remember when the lightning bolt struck Bray's rocking chair. I said and Bray proceeded to laugh maniacally. I said, no, that's not how you handle that. Considering that everyone was tapping, or the fan base, I should say, was tapping Bray Wyatt to be the next Undertaker, my mindset was no. Bray, all of Undertaker's mental games and advances on that territory needed to affect Bray Wyatt the way that no one else should have or had before. You know, keep that special that it took an Undertaker to throw Bray Wyatt off of his game. It took Bray Wyatt getting under the skin and into the head of a dead man who has a very human chill down his spine whenever it was that Bray Wyatt was around. Sad to say, this was just another loss at Mania and another setback. Speaking of setbacks, later that year they had a return feud with The Shield minus Seth Rollins, while the Wyatts had added Braun Strowman. This seemed like a major step backwards for both stables. I mean, it felt very much been there, done that. It was a match filler and a time killer. Roman had been in the main event of WrestleMania that same year, and now he felt relegated to revisiting a rivalry with no story left to tell. And Bray just, again, he seemed aimless. You would not have believed that 2 years prior, and it's very unfortunate that was the case with him, because this was just where we were at with him. Everything that we had feared would happen, you know, him feeling like just another guy, just another person, just another face on the roster. Our worst fears came true in the worst way possible. At Survivor Series 2015, Eric Rowan and Luke Harper would challenge the Brothers of Destruction, which was a great match to celebrate Undertaker's 25th year in the company. But even though Bray wasn't in the match, it was his faction that ate the loss. WrestleMania 32. On paper, Bray crossing paths with The Rock, this seems like an ill-fitting exchange, but keep a couple things in mind. First off, these were two third-generation stars, and, more importantly, their strong suit was the microphone. So, in that regard, you couldn't have asked for anyone better. Honestly, to go up against The Rock, or for Bray Wyatt to go up against, because I believe he was injured at this time, so he couldn't have a match of his own. But to me, I had always hoped back in the day. This is going way back. I had always hoped for a WrestleMania match between The Rock against Scott Steiner, because I felt like The Rock was the only person who could match him in his own insane promos. And they are both genetic freaks, so they would be able to play off of each other well. To me, at least, this was a WrestleMania moment and something special to see Bray Wyatt in there with The Rock. Just their verbal joust, and again, this shouldn't have worked. It should have felt like just a time killer. But to me, I genuinely liked that for seemingly the first time since The Rock facing off with John Cena, that someone new had been on the scene that could actually engage with him. And the crowd loved it. This wasn't... once you saw them and they got in there and they did their thing, and they had their back and forth on the microphone, it just worked. It didn't feel ill-fitting. Unfortunately, Eric Rowan was thrown in to take on The Rock, which lasted all of 6 seconds. Which, nearly 8 years later, little trivia note, you'd be surprised to hear that this is still The Rock's last match in WWE. So, a Wyatt family loss to the Brothers of Destruction at Survivor Series 2015. And then Eric Rowan's loss to The Rock at Mania 2016. A once rising star was seeing a crashing stock. "2016. A very weird and out of nowhere rivalry springs up out of left field with Randy Orton that saw such things as match forfeits, Orton actually joining the Wyatts. Both were the last men standing for Team SmackDown at the Survivor Series, and they even went on to win the Tag Team Championship. This all came to a head at the opening of 2017. We started to get a better picture of what it was that was going on. Now, I'll admit, as clunky as the storytelling was, Orton really did begin to grow on me as a member of the Wyatts. This is one of those unintentional things that WWE does when they match two people together for what is going to be a rivalry down the road. However, they tried this, for instance, with Chris Jericho and AJ Styles when AJ Styles first appeared. They teamed them together before they had them feud. And I got to be honest, I was really digging it. And speaking of ill-fitting, or what should have been ill-fitting on paper, I don't know, something about it made Randy Orton, his maniacalness, that's always been kind of hinted at, that, but they have, Randy Orton has it in him, but he and the company have never gone like full bore with him being as intimidating as a Triple H, for instance. You know what I mean? But more of his ruthlessness, Randy Orton's, was coming out as a member of not just the Wyatt family, but his tag team affiliation with Bray Wyatt. So, what we had at 2017, to me, seemed like the very last chance. The last gasp for the Bray Wyatt character to be legitimized. And the company to, at long last, get behind this guy. If you think getting these two together, Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton, was a tough sell, I can assure you something. Breaking them apart was equally a bumpy ride. So, you had Randy Orton win the Royal Rumble. Just so happens that Bray Wyatt goes on to win his first ever World Heavyweight Championship, I believe a week later? They won't... So, Randy Orton comes out on television and tells Bray Wyatt that he refuses to fight him. If Randy Orton is the number one contender because of the Royal Rumble victory, and Bray Wyatt is now the winner of the Elimination Chamber and hence the WWE Championship, Randy Orton refuses to go up against him. So then, a new number one contender is named or wins a tournament. Then, all of a sudden, Orton pipes up, then decides that he wants to go up against the number one contender being AJ Styles again. So, backstab, double cross, name it what you want. The backstab was seemingly out of nowhere. Randy Orton just shows up on TV and is burning the Wyatt house or Sister Abigail's house, dollhouse, I don't friggin' know. It just came out of nowhere. It was stupid. Like, I don't... mind you, again, he opted not to face Bray Wyatt because he was the number one contender. Bray Wyatt was the champion. And then out of nowhere, oh no. It wasn't just that Bray Wyatt lost the world title at WrestleMania to Randy Orton, but Bray Wyatt was a transitional champion in a string of transitional champions. John Cena, 2 weeks holding the title. Bray Wyatt, 49 days. Randy Orton, 49 days, and all of this was leading to a Jinder Mahal title reign. Bray Wyatt's first WWE championship was cut short, cut at the knees for a Jinder Mahal championship run that lasted almost half a year. Look, I personally like Jinder Mahal. I think that he has a lot going for him. I think he's very underrated. I think that there's been times where he has shown like comedic brilliance. Like he's like, despite his size and his physique, he's not an intimidating. He's not the route to go with him is not him being intimidating, but him just being a trash talker. And I have seen that out of him. But you need to build that. They just did that out of nowhere to pop some rating out in India that they never got, which isn't the last time that they would do that. Hello, Big E WWE Championship run, but that's not the point of this video. This Bray Wyatt losing. At this point, Bray Wyatt was 0 for 3 at WrestleMania. Losing big matches, and now 3 times. Now his third match. He not only loses yet again, oh no, he loses the WWE title, and this was his first WWE title. Man, this was a rough one. This you could just feel the oxygen go out of the arena. You could, and with fans just far and wide. I mean, and mind you, this seemed like the one final opportunity to resuscitate this man's career. If his title loss wasn't bad enough, from here, he went on to have 2 feuds that on paper should have generated some measure of buzz or notoriety. I'm, of course, speaking about Finn Balor and, by extension, the Demon, and Matt Hardy and his Woken whatever. I mean, what could have been? What could have been, and especially to compensate for past wrongs. I've always felt that Finn Balor is grotesquely overrated. The Demon isn't a character. It's just him doing cosplay. And with Matt Hardy, I've never seen the creative genius out of him. And when I heard what he had going on in TNA, broken Matt Hardy, woken Matt Hardy, whatever, I worried that it was just overrated. That, you know, I was asking myself, was it as good as people were trying to make it out to be? Because I had long since stopped watching TNA, and yeah, this was no great shakes either, I'm sorry to say. Which brings us to the following year's WrestleMania. So, Bray Wyatt and broken Matt Hardy had a rivalry, but it just wasn't clicking. And, you know, I just feel it's that, hey, this thing was a novelty in TNA, this gimmick that Matt Hardy had going on. And again, on paper, this should have worked. Two quirky, oddball, out there figures going head to head up against each other. Mind games, promo work, a story, but it was just dead air. And to me, this was like the last straw, because it's the Bray Wyatt feud, the Matt Hardy fight. It's like, man, this is really the end for Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt actually returned to help woken Matt Hardy become the Andre the Giant Memorial time filler piss break battle royal winner. This was just out of place. I mean, and it was out of place, and oddly enough, get this, it was par for the course when it was status quo when it comes to Bray Wyatt at this point. Things just coming out of nowhere, out of place, whatever. He interferes in John Cena's match at Royal Rumble 2014 for no reason. He cost Dean Ambrose a Hell in a Cell match against Rollins because he challenges The Undertaker to WrestleMania out of nowhere. Bray Wyatt, ladies and gents, doing the unexpected because reasons. Oh, I mean, a few weeks later, at the greatest royal fumble in Saudi Arabia, the leaders of worlds. Man. It's bad enough when Bray wasn't being protected. But now when fans got what they wanted, it still felt like he was spinning his wheels and running on fumes. It was just a creative no man's land. If they were going to tag, they had to be heels. Now, you might bring up the Brothers of Destruction, who, when in 2001, when they were tagging and eventually won the titles after WrestleMania 17, they were baby faces. Hold on. First off, they had been established at that point for years, both of them. They had each gone back and forth with their respective heel turns and championship wins. Let's not forget about that. By the time that the Brothers of Destruction were now a tag team, a unit, they had already gone back and forth, each of them playing heel, each of them playing babyface. They had won their respective world heavyweight titles. And Kane was on the rise to win 2 more singles titles, but they were already established. The leaders of worlds, in my mind, were not gonna. They wouldn't work as a babyface team. And, you know, much like how the Undertaker match did not work as a Mania match, this tag team for me, it didn't click. It's one thing to have them feuding, because this was the wet dream of every wrestling fan. You know, this was Matt Hardy was supposed to be the guy that could finally serve as an opponent to him to build a rivalry off of. And if you're listening to this now, what do you remember about these two? Honestly, that's an honest question. Like, what is this going to go down as one of Bray Wyatt's greatest feuds or biggest duds? Oh God. And if the world title wasn't enough of a hindrance on this man, the tag titles seem to be Bray Wyatt's kryptonite. as much as new members to the Wyatts after the Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton betrayals. Man, at this point, in all honesty, all hope just seemed lost. Bray was once again off TV. He even missed the following year's WrestleMania. And then, seemingly, out of nowhere, a puppet show. A puppet show. Bray Wyatt returned as evil Mr. Rogers. This is the type of career renaissance people who are down in the doldrums or seem like prospects once upon a time, but get passed up for newer wrestlers that are on the rise. This was not only the shot in the arm that Bray Wyatt desperately needed, but guys, who else could have made this work? Could you imagine them telling Chris Jericho, "Hey, you're gonna have a puppet show. You're gonna be a host for a live action cartoon." Nobody else could have pulled this off. And keep in mind, this wasn't just some gimmick or some part of the show. This wasn't a Piper's Pit or whatever. Guys, this got over. Again, I ask you the question, who the hell else could have pulled this off? This was cartoony, this was quirky, it was oddball, and it was right up Bray Wyatt's alley. Again, my hat goes off to you, sir, because of your creative genius behind it, your ability and your passion to pull it off where no one else could have. This, to me, again, we had gone years with Bray Wyatt seemingly lost, gone. There's no comeback for him. We've tried it. The heavyweight championship was the last gasp, the last hope, and even that was taken away from him. They did the broken stuff and the leaders of worlds and him against the demon, and nothing was taking hold. And to be honest, he needed a refresher. So the time away did him good because he was able to. And look, if you're looking at all the puppets or you're familiar with the Firefly Funhouse, these were all characters that had to do with previous incarnations, going all the way back to Huskus Harris the pig. Follow the Buzzards. I don't even remember what the name of the bird was called. The buzzard was called. Rambling Rabbit, based off of undoubtedly how people thought that Bray Wyatt's promo work, where at first it seemed very innovative and creepy, were just incoherent and repetitive. That's where Rambling Rabbit came from. Abby the Witch, Sister Abigail. I was stunned, and I was so happy for him. Wrestling fans and the Fireflies just had such a breath of fresh air and relief, to be honest. Actually, scratch that. If Bray Wyatt's initial debut on the scene was a breath of fresh air, this was that sigh of relief. That he could just come in and this quirky, oddball, on-paper gimmick that absolutely shouldn't have worked. And this would have been something like when WWE was neck deep in their PG stupidity that seemingly there was no escape from. When that was going on, this is something that would have been featured with John Cena or something, or the Muppets or whatever. And now this was a new method of Bray Wyatt expressing his creativity and being able to show what it is that he's got. And this was one of the highlights every Monday night. This was an instant hit. My God. And the fact that he was given so much creative control, and again with it, no matter who it was that was holding titles, which I'll get to in a second, this actually hit. People were looking forward to this. You heard the audience. I'm sure you could check the ratings. Man, people were completely behind this. They were saying to themselves, this is the creativity that Bray Wyatt has always had and should have been supported. In addition to that, again, context. Keep something in mind. This debuted just after WrestleMania 35, aka Fan Service Mania. What do I mean when I say that? Look who the major champions were after that event. You had as world champions Seth freaking Rollins and Kofi Kingston. Yo, Kofi Kingston. And oh man, if that weren't bad enough, Becky Lynch now holding 2 titles. And no one cared. I can assure you of something. If they might have cared about cringy Lynch, those days were gone. Or she was operating on borrowed time because she lost holding 2 titles just a month later. But Bray Wyatt again had recaptured Fireflies in a bottle. This was unprecedented, man. And you have to understand, the Firefly Funhouse was over even before The Fiend appeared. This goes back to what I was saying at the top of the stream. What is the... Look at this. Look at what you're seeing on your screen right now. I actually had people asking me, what does Bray Wyatt's passing have to do with horror? You tell me. And if that isn't obvious enough, once again, Tom Savini, famous makeup artist Tom Savini, who worked on the Night of the Living Dead franchise, who worked on Friday the 13th franchise, who's gone on to work on multiple horror makeup effects and multiple horror classics and films. That's who designed this mask. WWE had its own Pennywise. Think about that. Before that killer clown even appeared. And then you take into account the theme song. No, they weren't going with music that you could sing along to. This wasn't going to be what it was with Bray Wyatt with his song. Oh no, what was the theme song for The Fiend? Discordant Noise. Go after you're done watching this stream, listen to that music. Listen to the music that is the theme song and the lights. Everything played off perfectly from the frantic movement of the lights to what wasn't music at all. Instead, sounded like the noise that the Japanese chick sounded off on from the well when she climbed out of the television in the ring. He began using Mick Foley's mandible claw. I mean, you talk about a total reinvention. This was incredible, man. I cannot salute this any more than I can't overemphasize what this meant to wrestling fans, how great this was for the renaissance that Bray Wyatt needed, and frankly it should have never gotten to this point because Bray Wyatt as a character always worked. But man, I was thrilled as a horror fan. I was thrilled when this incarnation is what we got. I mean, if they did think about this, if they didn't have their next Undertaker before, by this time, this character, it was undeniable that they had gold. And we talked about full circle when it comes to Bray Wyatt. He takes out Kane on Raw, who was, again, his very first opponent within WWE. He takes him out on Raw, and then Bray Wyatt goes on to have a strong showing at the debut pay-per-view for The Fiend, which was that year's SummerSlam, when he went up against, not Seth Rollins. Who did he go? Oh, Finn Balor. I mean, let me put it this way. When it comes to Bray Wyatt, his popularity and that of The Fiend, the Firefly Funhouse, everything, all of these elements, Bray Wyatt's popularity toppled Seth Rollins' 2 title wins over Brock Lesnar. At that year's WrestleMania, Seth Rollins had seemingly done the unthinkable and beaten Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship. And then he went on to do the same thing at SummerSlam. Look, The WWE planned a rather lengthy title reign for the man who was able to pin Brock Lesnar. And then The Fiend swoops right in and says, nah, I don't think so. We're going to pump the brakes on your title reign. Now, unfortunately, and this was just idiotic, man. They just had to, Triple H had to just defend his boy, Seth Rollins, play politics, and when The Fiend went up against Seth Rollins for the Universal Championship, in a Hell in a Cell, the match was called off by the ref for excessive use of weaponry. I mean, you talk about completely fumbling the bag. Famously, WWE had always thought, okay, October, we should have a Hell in a Cell match because Halloween. You have a nightmare character that looks like a demonic clown. Finally, things actually align in your favor. You're obviously going with The Fiend in terms of eventually getting the the Universal Championship. You have merchandise that you can sell in addition to T-shirts, but that mask, because look at it. You had the chance to crown a heavyweight champion that looks like that is a fearmonger, is a monster in October, just before Halloween, in Hell in a Cell. Not only do you not do that, but Hell in a Cell is the most vicious match that WWE can possibly sponsor, and it ended on a no contest or a no DQ. What they were thinking, I don't know. I can't imagine. Regardless of that, it would be the case that at one of the Saudi shows, Crown Jewel or whatever, now they finally rectified. The damage had been done to an extent, but now The Fiend had at long last recaptured a heavyweight championship. Should it have happened at Hell in a Cell? Hell yes, it should have. You're damn right. Moving on from that. As high as he was riding, circumstance brought Bray Wyatt back to reality. Yes, he did have he was able to hold the title for a number of months, and it was great while that happened. Now, here's what's key. WWE was smart enough. Excuse me. WWE was at least smart enough to hold the championship on him while keeping The Fiend off television. Now, they had an interesting dynamic where, because technically the gimmick plays out that Bray Wyatt suffers from multiple personality disorder, the host of the Firefly Funhouse, as well as the demon, The Fiend. So you can have Bray Wyatt appear, your champion, appear on television. He can do his thing with the Firefly Funhouse. That way, you're able to keep the actual monster, the Dr. Jekyll. You can keep The Fiend special. Kudos to WWE for that, because believe me, they could have run this character straight into the ground. It could just, yeah. So, and they were smart enough to realize that when they did not have a need for The Fiend, or they couldn't have a good enough opponent for him, that they would have Bray Wyatt instead. This was smart. I don't think WWE gets credit for that. That was smart booking on their behalf. Unfortunately, The Office was recognizing that they were entering WrestleMania season. They needed a way to get the title off of Bray Wyatt and onto Roman Reigns without Roman beating The Fiend. Instead, they had Goldberg do it. Now, fans were understandably irate. Yet another undefeated streak is beaten, and by no less by a man with familiarity in that department. on the one hand, Goldberg versus Roman Reigns, the duel of the spears, was good on paper, but I mean, that could have been held off. This, you got to remember, this was back during the time. This was the final stretch of the Roman Reigns as we recognized him. He had just come back from his 1 year prior to his cancer. His cancer diagnosis being in recession. So I think that they were hoping to capitalize on that, dare I say, goodwill, and get a heavyweight title back on Roman Reigns. And admittedly, Goldberg and Reigns for a heavyweight title at WrestleMania was a big match. Sadly, that their best laid plans didn't come to fruition because Roman, that was during the rise of the pandemic, and Roman, due to health reasons, was not going to be able to participate in that match. Which, understandably, if fans weren't pissed off before that, the reason that Bray Wyatt was defeated for this title was because a match between two men was scheduled, and now one of those men was not going to be able to participate in the match. Just weeks after The Fiend was now defeated and his undefeated streak broken, man, you talk about an L. Fans were pissed, and hey, who could blame them? And look, I get it. However, if he was to be defeated by Goldberg, speaking of superheroes, look who came a-calling. So, because of the pandemic, there were several changes that needed to be taken into account. Primarily of all, it being that WrestleMania was not going to have a live attendance for the first time in its history. Couldn't risk it. Because of the coof, it could not be presented any liability to the company where, in this very uncertain times, that there could be an outbreak of either the audience, the office, or the wrestlers. So they had to think on their feet. And not only that, but WrestleMania that year fell on an entire weekend. This was the beginning of WrestleMania occurring for 2 nights. If The Fiend had defeated Kane and won his SummerSlam match when he re-debuted, it was only appropriate that Wyatt face the man who had defeated him at the place where it all went wrong. WrestleMania was supposed to be the stuff of dreams, but for Bray Wyatt, it had become the stuff of nightmares. If he was going to lose the Universal Championship, I can at least admit that this was a consolation prize. And speaking of WrestleMania, now that the match was set for Bray Wyatt against John Cena, his old nemesis, the Firefly Funhouse match and Undertaker's final fight were the 2 cinematic matches that were highlighted. This was what people were talking about after this event came to a close. Bray Wyatt had finally slayed the beast that was John Cena and defeated the man who had defeated him for his undefeated streak. Now, despite the title loss, maybe Bray Wyatt was turning over a new leaf and going on a tear. Running through old feuds and old wounds. He had defeated Kane once again, and he had defeated who was a previous foe of his in Finn Balor. Now, at long last, he had conquered his own demon, John Cena. Interestingly enough, once it was the case that he had lost the Universal title, that he had finally beaten John Cena, I can at least say, from a booking perspective, they did right by Bray Wyatt by making him a heat-seeking missile for the new Universal Champion, Braun Strowman. So, Bray spent the summer chasing Braun Strowman and the Universal title. They did have at least 1 or 2 matches before that, I believe. Again, in order to keep the Fiend strong, they had Bray Wyatt, and when I say Bray Wyatt, I mean the original Eater of Worlds Bray Wyatt. They had some kind of like spell that Firefly Funhouse Bray Wyatt cooked up or conjured, where Bray Wyatt, the Eater of Worlds, returned. Which I guess was a way of protecting him. Like, okay, we'll beat the original Bray Wyatt, who just couldn't win a big match to save his life. So we're not going to be beating the Fiend. Plus, we're keeping Bray Wyatt as we know him in the title hunt. I got to be honest, the feud, it could have been better. It could have been a lot better, especially considering like you're chasing a new champion. They could have played it off where it's like Bray knows what it's like to grip your new championship with desperate hands because of what it is that he was going through when he held the title. And keep in mind, Bray Wyatt lost his first heavyweight title to Randy Orton, who had previously been in the Wyatt family. Who else had previously been in the Wyatt family? Oh, that's right, Braun Strowman. I'm going to chalk up the weakness with this program to Braun Strowman because there really isn't much storytelling with him, and Bray had to be the one to carry that, and you can only do but so much because, look, you got to remember that Braun Strowman, like, he was the one holding the championship. So it isn't just that Bray has to carry a feud. He has to carry a match. He has to make this interesting for so many people. He's only one man and can only carry but so much, especially when I didn't want to not like Braun Strowman, but there really wasn't much to him. And much like Bray Wyatt, he had opportunity after opportunity. And he just... He himself didn't capitalize on his heavyweight title matches against Brock Lesnar twice, Roman Reigns once, and Seth Rollins. He had just every single time he stepped up to the plate, he flunked. He struck out. Now this was partially because of the booking, but it was also because he wasn't that much of an interesting character. So this brings us to the finale between Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt. By the time The Fiend had finally recaptured the gold at SummerSlam, his spotlight was stolen from him by a returning heel Roman Reigns. Ironic that, as a face, WWE feared taking the title off of The Fiend and putting it on Reigns at Mania, because at their second biggest show, they started on the road to doing just that, but for a heel Roman. 1 week later, The Fiend was once again dethroned. If there was one good thing that came out of the feud with Strowman, it was that Alexa Bliss had fallen under the spell of Bray. He was always best known as a cult leader and known for playing nice with others. I remember, speaking of Halloween, I remember the Halloween episode of WWE and Bray Wyatt in the Firefly Funhouse. He had dressed as a Mad Hatter and he looked appropriately freaky. He looked very, very creepy. And now with a sidekick, Alexa Bliss had finally, how can I put it? Alexa Bliss had finally tapped into that Harley Quinn character that she always kind of cosplayed as, but now she had her Joker, which I don't think many people have ever like linked those, connected those dots. And in addition to this new alliance of sorts, what this reignited, pun intended, was a feud with Randy Orton that seemingly this came out of nowhere, and perhaps now in hindsight we can say that this was one score to settle too often, too many. I hated this. The first time they fought, Bray lost his world title at Mania, just to catch his second wind as The Fiend, get set on fire, get pinned at the Mania rematch by Orton. 3 major matches, all Wyatt losses. They made the mistake of ending the streak. They had to know that Taker's career was winding down. And for the second time, they botched their chance to crown a new Undertaker. It was sad that, this was a very protracted and, pointless, aimless, if I'm being honest, feud. It started off as Alexa Bliss reminding Bray of his humiliating loss to Randy Orton at WrestleMania for the title. I mean, I don't know. This is what I mean when you almost have to be reminded that Randy Orton is this the apex predator and the viper and all that. This should have played a lot better. It didn't. There wasn't any intrigue behind it. And mind you, this was much like their first feud. This was a very long running conflict between them. This went on for months. And it felt like, again, I wasn't kidding. I think it was at the last pay-per-view before the year ended that in the match between Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton set his body on fire. It that was, I guess, supposed to pop a rating or get people excited or interested. It just took the Fiend off of television, and whatever. It was nothing, man. It was just so unfortunate. And look, a lot of times as wrestling fans, we want long storytelling, so we don't go through the cycle of, okay, people are fighting this week. Oh, match lead to a match at a pay-per-view. One and done. Now we're gone. Just to get out of that funk, just to get out of that repetition, we often speak about the need for stories to breathe. This had 6 months of build, I guess. I can't even call it build because it's what did it build? It was just a match, and they had already had a match before it. So why is it happening at WrestleMania? And again, they took the title off of The Fiend the year prior. So now they have Alexa Bliss backstab Bray Wyatt for really just no reason at all. Just to have a curveball, just to have a twist. It was stupid. It was pointless. It was astonishing to me that Bray Wyatt could finally pin John Cena, but now couldn't overcome Randy Orton. Sadly, shortly after, the Fiend and Bray Wyatt was future endeavored that summer. Which brings us to last year, 2022. Now it was time that Bray Wyatt return, that he be rehired by the company now that it was under new management under Triple H. Look, I understand, considering he had been gone for over a year, he and his fans may have felt that a clean slate was needed and in order. But a third incarnation proved one fresh start too many. I can describe the other Bray Wyatt avatars, meaning their character, the Swampland Doomsday Prophet, the maniacal puppet show host, the evil clown. Uncle Howdy? I don't know what that was, what they were going for, and again, much like what I just described with Randy Orton, with the Randy Orton feud. To be honest, starting from Bray Wyatt's return in 2022 until his last match at the Rumble this past year against LA Knight, they had 4 months to tell this story of whatever it was that they were trying to do. What does anybody know? Can someone put it in the comments? What is it that they were trying to tell us with Uncle Howdy? I don't know. Just weird guy, pulling the strings of Bray Wyatt. Oh, before he was the host of a puppet show. Now Bray Wyatt, as we know him, is under the control, under the puppet strings of Uncle Howdy. Okay, who is Uncle Howdy and what does he want? What is the end goal here? What are we headed towards? It just again, bro, they had time. They had 4 months to tell us who this character was. And mind you, look at all the other times that Bray appeared and you instantly understood. You instantly understood the Wyatt family, and you got the puppet show and the Fiend, and this, I don't know what this was. I can't describe it. The only reaction from the crowd was confusion or indifference, and from here, they would have sporadic appearances of the Firefly Funhouse, unadvertised and thrown together at the last minute Mania match against Bobby Lashley that never happened, and a hiatus for undisclosed reasons. This wasn't the return that fans had expected or hoped for. And then we come full circle. It's with a heavy heart that the news story dropped. I couldn't believe how young he was. And this passing so soon after Brody Lee's death in 2020. I mean, it's a week later. I'm still shocked over Bray Wyatt's death in a week that saw the passing of Terry Funk and Bob Barker, celebrities amongst WWE and pro wrestling. Look, it's never a good time to lose someone. It's never opportune, but man, 36 years old. Windham Rotunda, Bray Wyatt. He leaves behind 4 children, a fiance, and a legacy. It's often the case that genius is only recognized post-mortem. Bray Wyatt leaves such a delightfully mad memory behind that was equal parts maddening when his character's brilliance went unrewarded or unappreciated. I mean, he did get to work with big names, especially at WrestleMania. We all just wish that it could have made for Mania moments with major victories instead of crushing defeats. I mean, his promo work was Jake the Snake Roberts-esque with his soft delivery and Goldust-like in its creep factor and eeriness. I mean, when his mind games weren't creeping their way under his opponent's skin, he was charming the live audience to his cause. If the Shield could captivate crowds through sheer blunt force, the Wyatt family could mesmerize on the mic those of us watching from home. I'm grateful for the Firefly Funhouse because, I mean, it gave us a look into this mad genius's mind and all its inner workings. A Mad Hatter and a madcap mental state. Oscar Levant was an American piano player whose talents landed him radio game show roles, a hosting gig on a TV talk show, movie roles, and even a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He was quoted as saying, There's a fine line between genius and insanity. I have erased this line. End quote. I think that's the beat that Bray Wyatt can play to. But while Levant had a piano to perform with, Wyatt would play to the crowd. And the masses would respond in kind by raising their cell phones to signal his descent, which Bray led with a lantern. Let us never forget the wild rides that Wyatt's sermons would take us on. How he renewed faith in us that the star power of old could live anew. While title runs continued to last unprecedented time frames, lest you forget who it was that Roman defeated to begin his 3-year reign as Universal Champion. To tie this back to World of Horror, something that occurred to me today, considering WWE's affiliation with NBC, in my small way, I am officially petitioning that next year, the Firefly Funhouse get its own haunted house at Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights. What better way to remember the life and crimes of Bray Wyatt? What a way to immortalize him and for his spirit to live on and for the masses. It really is the least that can keep his memory going, if only for a season. But I think it's something that fans would really appreciate, especially since NXT campus or whatever they call it, Academy is in the Florida area. I mean, to me, this would just be a great way of celebrating him. In closing, for the man who had the whole world in his hands, this is a friendship that will never ever end. Brother Brody and Sister Abigail greet you. It's time to heal.